I had told you to see if you could trace the flow of the blood through the circulatory system of the fish and see if you could draw a diagram of that. Well, I've got a diagram up here on the board, so we're going to go through that and you can check yours with it and see if you were correct or not. So the blood is going to start out, we have to start someplace. It's going to be going in a continuous cycle, but if we start at the heart, it's going to go from the atrium down to the ventricle, with the atrium being the top part of the heart, where all the blood empties into it. It then delivers its blood into the ventricle, which then is going to pump that out to the rest of the body. Now, fish are only going to have a two-chambered heart. You're going to see later on that amphibians have a three-chambered heart. Reptiles have a three-chambered heart, but their ventricle is partially divided, and then when we get to mammals, we actually have a four-chambered heart. So we're going to compare these two here in a second, but before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's continue with the circulatory system of the fish. So the blood goes into the ventricle, it then goes to the ventral aorta, and then to the afferent brachial arteries, and then it's going to go to the gills, where it's going to pick up oxygen. Now, all of this is going to kind of happen on the belly side of the fish. Then we're going to go over to the back side of the fish. So once it's been oxygenated by the gills, it goes into the efferent brachial arteries and into the dorsal aorta. And then once it gets to the dorsal aorta, it's going to branch off two different directions. It can either go to the brain and the head, or it can go to the rest of the body, to the organs and the kidneys. Depending on which direction it's gone, it will take one of the cardial veins, either the anterior and the posterior, and then it will come back to the heart again. So if we color code this to show where it's oxygenated and where it's not, the gills are obviously where your blood's going to get oxygenated. So at this point, I'm going to kind of do this half and half, because when it first goes into the gills, the blood is not oxygenated, so it's going to be blue. And then when it comes out of the gills, it's going to be red because it's oxygenated. Then it's going to go here through the efferent brachial arteries, here to the dorsal aorta, and then it's going to go out to the rest of the body and to the head. And when it does that, it's going to start out being oxygenated. But obviously the point of this is to get oxygen to the rest of the tissues. So once the blood drops off the oxygen, it's now going to be deoxygenated. And so it's going to look blue. And so as it goes back, when it goes through your veins, remember your veins are what carries it back to the heart, it's going to be deoxygenated. And so everything in the heart is actually deoxygenated blood. Then as it goes through the ventral aorta, back to the afferent brachial arteries, and then back to the gills. So in a fish's heart, all of the blood there is deoxygenated. That is not the case with humans who have a four-chambered heart, because, and this is a very, very simplified diagram, but because we have four chambers, one atria and one ventricle are for oxygenated, the other atria and the other ventricle are for deoxygenated. So in mammals, you're going to have the blood on the right side of the heart is going to be pumped toward the lungs. It's going to pick up oxygen. It's going to go back to the left side, and then it's going to go out to the rest of the body, drop off its oxygen, and then go back to the right side of the heart. So, and you may wonder why I have this backwards. That's because when you look at someone, their right side is on your left side. So that's why I have the right side over here in place of on over here. So in mammals, in humans too, the left side is oxygenated and the right side is deoxygenated. But if you only have two chambers in this two-chambered fish heart, all of it is deoxygenated. Now, what I want you to be able to do is to look at the diagram in your book. Now, this is, okay, it's not as good as the diagram in your book, but it's supposed to look like the diagram in your book. So I wouldn't worry about trying to copy all this down, because it's the same one that's on the bottom of page 603. And so let's look at this diagram and let's think about how it's going through the body of the fish over here, okay? So if I start at the heart, here's my atrium, here's my ventricle. It's going to pump it through the ventral aorta into the afferent brachial arteries. It's going to go to the gills, where in those capillaries there, it's going to pick up the oxygen that it needs. So then my line turns red. When it goes up here, it's now going to go through the efferent brachial arteries, which are these guys right here. It's going to go into the dorsal aorta. The dorsal aorta is this one long one on the back side of the fish, and it's going to go one of two places. It's either going to go up here to the brain, where it's going to drop off its oxygen, or it's going to go this direction, where it's going to go to the kidney. It's going to go to the rest of the organs in the body. Again, it's going to drop off its oxygen. It then turns blue, becomes deoxygenated, and goes back to the heart over here through the anterior and posterior cardial veins. So that's going to be here. And where did I draw the other one? Oh, anterior cardial vein right here. So it comes back down here. I did want to, I put it in your lesson plans. I'm going to point it out here again too. Make sure that the diagram in your book, that this anterior cardial vein is actually pointing to the blue one. There, in some of the earlier editions of the book, they did not have it pointing to the right spot. So make sure that that's pointing to blue blood and not to red blood, okay? So the blood goes back into the anterior and posterior cardial veins, goes back, and then ends up going back into the heart that way, okay? So that's what that was the point of doing this, was so that this diagram would make sense, because it doesn't probably make a whole lot of sense unless you've really got an understanding of where all that blood is going, okay? So I just wanted to give you that general overview of how the blood flows through the heart of a fish.